out of all the heroes in Overwatch 2, Reaper might just be the one that was the most left behind. Reaper's close range, hyper niche playstyle only works in Overwatch 2 under very certain conditions and very strict metas that are good for him to counter tanks, basically. Reaper has trouble getting in and even staying in fights, so you're better off playing other close range options other than Reaper most of the time. So, how do we fix him? Well, here is a wild idea that I have had. Now, before I go into this, a couple of things here. This is complete creative exercise, so any budget restrictions, engine restrictions, anything like that that may, theoretically not let this work if it were to be implemented in the game, we're going to ignore for now. I'm not a developer at Blizzard. I don't know anything about how they make characters. This is all just, theory and creativity. So there's that. Also, the numbers that I say in this video, I'm not really going to use them. I'm going to kind of avoid numbers. It's going to be general phrases. Like, this is going to be a short cooldown. This does a moderate amount of damage. I don't want to get caught in the weeds. I just want to get in the general idea. This is not about balancing. This is about general character design. And also, 3, that was my usual spiel. My new one is, I cannot test these abilities. I have no idea how they would feel, right? I'm just kind of coming up with the ideas. Again, I'm not a Blizzard developer. Some of these things, they might just not work. They may sound good on paper, but when you try to play them, they just might not work. I have no way to know that. So if an ability feels like it might not work, it probably doesn't. But, it's really more, again, getting the ballpark of the kind of things that you want to change or the kind of things you want to get going with the character. So anyways, getting that out of the way, let's go ahead. Let's talk about where Reaper fits into Overwatch. So Reaper is Overwatch's de facto tank buster, right? When he's meta in Overwatch 2, he is solely to put pressure on the tank. Think Malga and Winston dive metas, right? Reaper was there to deny those characters value. Ideally, Reaper's kit plays like any other flanker, where he uses one of his abilities to get in and one of his to get out, but the problem is that Reaper really can't keep up with those other flanking DPS characters. His range is very, very short, and that's where most of his power is, right? In that really close range. But unlike Genji, Tracer, or even Venture, who are all closer range heroes, they all have some longer range or more effective ways to make up their range deficit, right? Genji right-click, Tracer blinks, Venture primary and drill movement, right? Reaper doesn't really have that, right? Reaper's movement abilities are very slow and easy to track, and his Wraith Form takes him out of the fight for a little bit with no good ways to get back in or stay in the fight without having to wait for that cooldown to come back, right? Tracer can blink out, Genji's got multiple things that let him escape. Shadow Step doesn't let Reaper do that. Only Wraith allows Reaper to escape. And that means that he has to wait to go back into fights, or wait for it to come back to go back into fights, right? The lifesteal is really only effective against tanks, where he can do the maximum amount of damage. Otherwise, in other duels against other characters, it really isn't that much of a factor at the end of the day, especially if you're dueling another DPS. Nowadays, with the DPS passive, it's just even harder for Reaper to keep up, right? So for this rework, I want to focus on Reaper's uptime, his versatility, and his decision-making. I don't want him to play exactly like a Tracer, Genji, or a Venture, and I want him to keep his shotgun identity, but just make him a little less viable against tanks and a little more viable against other characters. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the actual rework. So, the Reaping is Reaper's passive, by the way, if you don't know. I love this incredibly high-def image that I found online. But, basically, how this is going to do is that it's still like a lifesteal, but it scales with enemy health dealt, or percentage of enemy health dealt, rather than purely scaling off of the damage that Reaper does. So let's say Reaper takes a duel with a regular 250 HP hero, right? He does 50 damage or 20% of their life, right? And we'll say it heals like 12%. So he does 20% of this character's life. If he takes the same duel, or he takes a duel with a 500 HP hero, so double their health, and he does 100 damage, double the damage that he dealt, he would still only get 20% life steal, right? He would get that same 12 health back if that were the number. So basically, this way, Reaper doesn't just scale much better against tanks, at least in survivability. He can actually take duels with squishies, and his heal be more consistent in those duels, right? Damage dealt on overhealth won't change the ratio, so if you do 200 damage on a 200 HP target as opposed to a 500 HP target, the percentage would still be different. It does, or like it would still be based off of what their regular max health is, not the overhealth value. I also have in here that Reaper's damage is going to scale with the amount of health that he has lost. So basically, the less health he has, the more damage he does. Now, I realize that this seems, backwards to him healing himself back up, but I promise there are other ways where this comes into play, so you'll just have to hold on for a second. But what you need to know is just, for the time being, when Reaper has lower health, he will be doing more damage, okay? Now, the less health that he has, he also will be scaling his health higher because he's doing more damage at lower healths, right? And again, we'll talk about where this gets more interesting, because it's not just a way to give him more survivability in the fight. It's more about his other abilities. So just keep that in mind when we keep going. Primary and secondary fire. So Reaper is not getting a true new secondary fire. If you played the April Fool's patch, Reaper was able to control his shotgun separately. And honestly, I did like that idea a lot. I think it was really silly. So basically, Reaper can fire his shotguns separately on left click and right click. They're going to do less damage overall. We don't want Reaper to be like the super high damage character, but in return, when he fires one at a time, he will have a better spread. He'll have a better spread, which effectively makes his range better and it makes him more accurate. Okay, so and if he decides to fire them at the same time, like let's say he hits both buttons at the same time, it will do like similar spread, if not worse, than it does on live. So what this does is it gives Reaper a skill. It gives him a rhythm and some skill to firing his deep, or his primary fire, right? So basically, in order to keep the best spread and DPS value possible, he needs to be in like a really good rhythm sync of like left shot, right shot, left shot, right? And that gives him the best spread and will effectively give him the most DPS overall. If you are doing it like, basically like you can fire them both, you get this big whatever, you can do boom, boom, or you could do like boom, 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 boom. Like there's a lot of rhythms you can do, and the way that you figure it out is that between each shot, like the spread will kind of be coming in and out, right? So if you're perfectly timed, you'll get the best spread possible. If you're like halfway between, you'll get like half of that spread, right? So it's decision making. It's like, okay, I'm closer range, so I don't need to make sure I have the best possible spread, and maybe I can just focus more on burst instead. Or if I'm longer range, or I'm trying to take a duel at like a safer distance, then I want to make sure I really have that rhythm. But basically, it gives him a little decision making on his primary fire, and it makes shooting more interesting and dynamic. I understand it may be a little clunky in practice, and I think there's something to work with there. Just as like put a pin in it, like, it may not work like I think it does, but I do think this is really interesting, and it could be a lot of fun just to get that moment-to-moment gameplay down. So let's go on to Wraith Form. So Wraith Form does not act like it does on live anymore. This is a quick, short, omnidirectional dash. So basically, Reaper can choose any direction to go. And again, it's very short, right? It comes out very quickly, and he does not go a very big distance. Honestly, think more of like a casserole. I think that's probably akin to what I want. Maybe a little further, but something around there. So it is invulnerable during the, again, very short duration, like as quick as a casserole. But Reaper can't shoot during it, right? So it's just a really quick reposition tool. I kind of consider it's like more like a parry than a don't die button. It's not for sustain. It's for like, oh, somebody is shooting something at me. I'm going to do a really quick, skillful, well-timed negation of it, rather than just I'm going to go invulnerable for a couple seconds, and like that's the whole thing, right? Like if you want to dodge a flux, you got to have the time. Although I don't think it would dodge flux. That's a bad example. If you want to dodge an Iliari sunburst, you have to have the right timing on the explosion to dodge it. Kind of like how Sombra can dodge with translocator, stuff like that, right? Where this ability gets some more style to it and kind of plays into Reaper's kit more. If you dash through somebody, you will apply a small damage over time effect. Just damage. Nothing fancy, right? This gives him some more sustain, and also just like more consistent damage in case something's wrong with the duel. It's not a lot. I don't want it to be a lot. But it can be reapplied. Like you can have multiple stacks on one character, and you're kind of maybe thinking to yourself, why can you have multiple stacks on one character? This is not on one of like, it doesn't store charges, but what you can do on Reaper now is that in Wraith Form, you can sacrifice part of your health bar to recast it before the ability cooldown is done. So if you played Mirror Watch, or you are playing Mirror Watch, this is what Tracer has right now, is that she can sacrifice some of her health to get another blink. That is what I have with Reaper. So Reaper has ways to augment his health back down and also have more. Basically, this is risk versus reward, right? Reaper, if he's at lower health, then he does more damage. So he can potentially win a duel more effectively when he's at the lower health. But he has to sacrifice his health for it. And if he makes the wrong call and he goes, oh, I'm going to use another Wraith Form and lose some of my health, he may just lose, right? He may just explode. Because again, this is not a long invulnerability tool. He's not going to go very far. He's not going to be invulnerable for very long. It's just a way for him to reposition and kind of throw the enemy off guard. And if he does it poorly and he manages his health poorly, then he will die, right? But basically, again, it's risk versus reward, and I think this is a really interesting dynamic of a character that wants to be at lower health, and has ways to get himself to lower health, but then also ways in his kit that counteract that. So you're trying to find that balance of playing with your resources and trying to find a sweet spot of risk versus reward. And I feel like that makes Reaper's game plan really cool and really dynamic, and there's a lot you can do with it, right? Now, I'll talk about potential problems with this later, but I think for right now, like, this is, Wraith mode is, he wouldn't use it as much as a Tracer Blink. I want to make that clear. Like, the cooldown's not going to be, like, that long, but it's not also going to be, like, a short cooldown, generally. So, he may even want to start fights before, like, using his, what's it called? He may want to start fights at lower health, which may be, like, really interesting, because most characters don't want to do that, but I think that'd be really cool if Reaper did. But yeah, that's a lot of stuff with Wraith Form. Let's go ahead and talk about Shadow Step, because it is still here in a kind of a different form. Also another very crunchy picture from online, but this is on a long cooldown like it typically is now. Basically, it works like it does on live. It just doesn't go, it goes about as far as it used to, right? It works like it does on live. Except the extra thing to this is that if he aims this at a surface, so a ceiling, a floor, a wall, whatever, he will be absorbed into the wall and become a shadow on the wall, basically. Um, if he does this, it will take half of his life. So Shadow Step is basically what it is on live. I think maybe a little quicker on cast would be cool. But it's more of like a quicker reposition tool. Unless you do the surface thing. I don't want it to be that quick because I don't want this to be another invulnerability like option. I want this to be more of like a way to get him into fights rather than keep him in the fight or, stuff like that. So when you go into a surface, or you become a shadow, right? You're gonna take half of your life bar. This is a way to, punish it, not punish, but like since he has a second invulnerability ability, I don't want it to be completely like for free. It also puts him more into his sweet spot range, which you can play with a little more. But basically, he can stay in the surface and move around for like a few seconds, maybe like 2 or 3, I don't know. And he can move around freely on that surface. He can't like fall out of it. He can recast it early to fall out if he wants, but he's not like, you can't just like slide off of a floor or something, I don't think. And it would take like a second to come out. If there is another side of the surface, so if he does it on like a wall that leads into a mega room or something, or if there's like a really big, like think like Watchpoint Gibraltar, the bottom, like under the bridge, if he puts it up into the ceiling, and there's another way to go, like on the other side, like if he were to travel through the surface, there would be somewhere for him to stand. He can choose to pop out on that other side. It would take a second. Like think about if you played Tears of the Kingdom, Link has like the Ascend ability, basically that, but in multiple directions. Again, I don't know if the engine would require this. It may be very clunky. I'm just putting it out there as the idea. Basically, the long startup means that this is more for positioning pre-fight. So it hopefully won't be super frustrating. Again, the invulnerability was more of like it felt wrong to just like Reaper. Basically, I'll talk about one of the alternatives I had. Basically, it was just Reaper. If he did it against the surface, he would instantly try to go through it. And then if it wasn't possible, then he would just like pop out, right? Like he would just shadow step normally, and wherever he was, that's where he'd be. That in my brain felt like it was going to be clunky. So every time you went into a surface, you actually like became part of the shadow. That felt better. Or if you could just opt to do it. But yeah, he can exit whenever he wants, or he can choose to go to the other side. Again, this is not for mid-fight. His mid-fight stuff is his passive and his Wraith Form. This is to allow him to get to places more effectively, with more options. And again, since it's long and, it takes a long time for him to get out of all of these abilities, it's much more likely somebody will find him on the way, and he's going to be in trouble, and he's going to have to expend more of his Wraith Forms to try to get away. So this is not a get out of jail free card. This is not let him get in for free. In fact, it's really risky to use if you use it to its full extent. There were a lot of ideas that came in my mind when I was thinking about this ability. I got to be so real with you. I don't like exactly what I came up with. If he just had regular Shadow Step and it was faster, then that would probably do way more. It'd probably be a much better solution. So, keep this one with a grain of salt. But for now, I just wanted him to have something cool, something unique. So yeah. Speaking of something unique, let's talk about his new ultimate ability, Touch of Death. So, basically, when Reaper casts this ult, he becomes engulfed with shadow, and he kind of starts to lose his physical form. He can move around much more quickly, but he cannot use his shotguns. He can use his dashes, but not the shotguns, right? He is not invulnerable. He's still targetable, but his hurt box shifts all over the place. Basically, he's like a cloud of smoke. It's much harder to see what he's going to get hit by. But he still has the same regular health and everything. He's just moving a little quicker. He basically, as he moves, he's going to leave a little trail of smoke around where he was, okay? And it only stays for a couple of seconds, dissipates pretty quickly. If you are touched by it, you will get a new status effect called Frightened, okay? Frightened does not allow you to use your primary or secondary fires. So basically, it's reverse hack, right? Now you may be thinking, why are you giving Reaper a CC ability? Well, I'll talk about why. One, I think just disabling primary and secondary fire is way less frustrating than disabling your abilities, and it basically just means that you can't take a duel with Reaper, right? Other characters are just gonna have to leave, right? So like if he frightens a Tracer, Tracer can't win a duel, but she can still leave, right? If he frightens a Winston, Winston can still jump away. So this is basically more of like a tool to win duels or to take space or more effectively try and stop pushes, right? So you can end this ult early yourself. Like you can go through somebody and decide, you know what, that's all I want. I want to get back into shotgun mode and play the game. Or you can try to use it in its whole duration and get as many people frightened as possible. Again, this is just to give Reaper some more playmaking potential and also give him something. This is like a movement ability too, so he can decide like if he needs to eject from a fight early, he can use his ult to do that as well. There's another thing that you can do. Also, you know, just in general, like you can use your movement abilities while you're doing this. So you can kind of like dash through people and get a frightened on. You know, I think that could be really fun. And again, he's not invulnerable regularly, so you can still kill him. Just because Reaper is coming at you while he's in touch of death does not mean that he is invulnerable. He can still be stunned. He can still do all of that. This is not like a free engagement tool. This is just something that makes it a little harder for everyone else to touch him. But yeah, I think Frightened as a status effect could be added to some character in the future, not called Frightened, just the no more primary, secondary fire, only abilities. I don't think it's as bad as Hack, but you know, it is still pretty powerful and frustrating. That's why I put it only on his ult, and only when these specific conditions are met. You know, he has to get a smoke touch, you know, they have to go through a smoke cloud. Frightened is obviously something that can be cleansed and all of that. So there's a lot I think you can do to play around this. But I wanted Reaper to have an ult that goes more with his aggressive playstyle and helps him win duels rather than this big AoE weird Death Blossom ability that just doesn't really make sense for Overwatch anymore. So that's Touch of Death. And then that's kind of the whole kit, right? That's kind of the idea I had for Reaper. So we'll go ahead, we'll talk about some of the problems. I touched on this earlier, but giving him 2 invulnerability moves isn't what I planned originally, but I think logistics-wise, he had to have some kind of way to confirm, or like some kind of secondary step between phasing through the wall or whatever. And so that was just like, let's just put him in the wall and then allow him to exit whenever he leaves, and if there's another side to, or whenever he wants, and there's another side to exit, he can go on that side. That's kind of where that came from. The omnidirectional dash may feel clunky. I would probably if it were actually in the game, it would probably work more like Genji dash, where he looks where he's going, because Tracer doesn't have to look where she's going, but she's also not going up or down, and I wanted Reaper to be able to go vertically. So I would think it would probably have to work more like Genji's, but if there were a way to make it so that he doesn't have to look around like that, I guess since he can't shoot, it doesn't really matter. So that's probably how it would be implemented. I already talked about it, but another new status effect on the DPS may not fit very well. It may more so want to be on like a support or even a tank or something. I considered having the shotguns do different effects, but I think that might have just become overly complicated and a little too similar to Mauga. Oh, so since he can augment his own health and like take health away from himself, he probably shouldn't be able to kill himself. But I also don't want him to secure like a way for him to start fights completely at 1 HP. Like I don't want him to just go all the way down to 1 and then like catch somebody off guard, and then, you know what I mean? Like I feel like it would have to cap somewhere, or be like how Tracer is in Mirror Watch, where it won't let her cast the ability if she doesn't have enough health to extend. Which if Reaper does damage and gets his health back, then he will be getting more health to use as a resource. So I think that's probably fine. It probably should work like it does with Tracer right now. I said it already. If he was able to use his abilities in his ult, I already had him use the dash, but if he could use the TP as well, it would be fun, but maybe a little too strong. So I'm a little cautious about that. I think he should be able to dash though. I think that's part of it. But yeah, basically, Reaper needs depth, right? He needs something. He's too niche. He doesn't win duels. It's really weird that he doesn't for the kind of character that he is, but he needed something. He needs some flair, some playmaking potential, all of that. I feel like his kit is just really, really simple. And not that there's anything wrong inherently with simple kits, but Reaper's just doesn't, it lacks the depth that you would want out of a character. He is just very one note, one dimensional, and I feel like just giving him some other things, allow his uptime to be higher, give him some moment-to-moment decisions, like all the time he's making decisions. It would make this character really interesting. And at the end of the day, shotguns are easy to use. He would be harder to play in general, but I feel like there is still value to be found if you aren't utilizing his entire kit. That's not something we would know until we actually tested it out and if it were actually implemented. But my gut tells me that there's a way to get value out of this character without truly mastering everything there is to know about him. So his skill floor isn't that high. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments if you think I'm totally trash, if you love Reaper and you would never ever want him to change. Recently, I've been getting a lot of comments from people who have not been liking some of my reworks, especially if they play those characters. Nothing wrong against you guys, nothing against you or your character. I just think that characters should be a little more engaging to play and less frustrating. Reaper is one of those that's more on the more engaging to play side and less so on the less frustrating. But, I do think we do want to strive for characters to be more engaging for everybody to play with or against. So that's kind of where these reworks come from. If you like this video, please don't be afraid to give the like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. It does help me out. It really does. I do these discussions live on my Twitch. Every time I go live, I do a discussion of some variety. If you want to come talk with me in person about this stuff, twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway. I'd really appreciate it. I'd love to hear back from you guys. I really do. Even if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. And all the rest of my socials are down below. I hope you have a good day. Thank you for watching.